Welcome to another spectacular screencast by yours truly, Seth David. I'm the president and founder and chief nerd at Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, in case you've never met me before. And this is going to be a deep dive, a serious walkthrough, exploring the new QuickBooks Online layout. We're going to break this down step by step. This video is going to be broken up into 3 parts, all one video, 3 parts, so you can kind of pause and come back for each section. In the first part, I'm going to break down this dashboard for you, and my goal here is to take it from being overwhelming to something that you will see is going to be incredibly useful. The second part is going to be the sidebar here and what's going on there. We're going to break down each and every one of these parts, and part 3 is called Where's My Shit? And that's because a lot of the feedback I've gotten from a lot of you who have been exposed to this, or, you know, I don't want to say had it forced on you, because you can still switch back for now, but eventually you're going to be stuck with it. So as I said in a recent video talking specifically about the bank fees area, you might as well get ahead of this and get used to it and learn how to use it. And I think at the end of this video, you're going to agree with me when I say that when you take the time to go through this and break it down and see what's really under the hood here, not only isn't it as bad as you think, it's actually really good. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove why I think it's actually really good. And I promise you, I'm not being paid by Intuit or anyone else for that matter to do this video. This is truly, purely my opinion based on my experience and my, I don't want to say 10,000 hours, but I put in quite a few hours going through this and understanding every little nook and cranny and what it does. So the first reaction, the reason this was even brought to my attention, is my good friend Mariette Martinez sent me a screenshot of, you know, pretty much what you're looking at on my screen here. And she says to me, Seth, what am I looking at here? And I said, I don't know. I've heard people talk about it. I haven't really taken a close look at it yet myself. So let me dig in and I'll get back to you. And I did. I dug in and I got back to her and I did an unboxing over in my Circle community, which, by the way, this whole write-up with a lot of screenshots and kind of like the textbook, the digital textbook version of this, is going to be, by the time you're watching this, something you can find right here. Here's my Circle community. You go to QuickBooks Online, that's where all this stuff is going. Here's my unboxing, here was my introduction to the new QuickBooks bank feeds, and this very article and post and video is going here next. And what I'll quickly share with you is that in the write-up, you'll see lots of detail. What I'm about to go through here in video form is pretty well covered here with the screenshots and the text in that format, because there's lots of different types of learners out there, and you may be somebody who, actually more like myself, it may surprise you to know, prefers to have something to read than watch a video. So I try to address every possible learning style. I give you the video, I give you the write-up in textbook form with all the screenshots and everything you need. And then, of course, audio-wise, I try to explain things in such a way that even if you're not seeing what's going on my screen, you can still kind of follow along. I didn't know I did this until years and years ago. Somebody reached out to me and said they were legally blind, but they still like to listen to my videos because apparently I do a good job, unwittingly maybe, of explaining things well enough that you don't necessarily have to be seeing what I'm doing. I digress. Let's dive in. We've got work to do. This is going to take a bit, and like I said, I'll give you logical points to stop so you can kind of review. And by the way, if it's not already obvious, what you should be doing, my opinion of course, is pausing this video right now, if you haven't already, and go open up a copy of a QuickBooks company file that has this new interface. And keep your finger on the pause button so that as I go through things, you can pause me and go practice what I've just shown you. So, with that in mind, let's talk about part one. Part one. What am I looking at? What is this dashboard? Now, if you're somebody who even has, let's call it, neurodivergent tendencies, which I would put myself in that category, you look at something like this and you're like, oh my God, it's like overwhelming. Like, what am I looking at? There's too much going on here, right? So the first thing I want to have you all do, and this is, you know, because I'm from Los Angeles, we do these kind of things here, is let's take a breath, right? And just breathe in for a 4 count, hold it for a 4 count, and exhale for an 8 count. I do this in my daily meditation. It really does help you physically. It sort of physically forces you to relax. It slows your heart rate down. And I'm not kidding when I say that it's important to do this right here and now, because it will help with that feeling of overwhelm that I know a lot of you are having when you look at this, and then it reframes your mindset a little bit so that we can go through this slowly and comprehensively and just break this down and understand what's going on. And the good news is, spoiler alert, a lot of this, in fact, it's fair to say all of this is very customizable. So I'm going to show you as I go through it how you can chisel this down to give you just the stuff that's most important to you and leave the rest of it tucked away neatly. So let's start with this bar at the top. You wouldn't know it from looking here yet, but as you scroll across, you can get the sense of what's going on here. These are major areas like payroll, right? Lending, they're added in. You know, they bought Credit Karma, so I believe this is their sort of integration of owning Credit Karma and then the related ability to recommend lending resources for you, right? Business tax, pretty straightforward. Most of this is pretty straightforward, right? These are major areas in the accounting system that you might want to get to. And so it's right here at the top. What you're going to find out in a little bit is that they're referring to each of these things now as the apps, right? Each of these is an app. So just to get some nomenclature down so you understand, when we say apps, when we look down below there at my apps, this is the stuff we're talking about, okay? So for now, all we can do with this is kind of scroll right and left to find the thing we might need and click on it, okay? And then that's going to take you into the area. I'm not going to do that now. You can do that. You can pause me and do that, and you'll see. But then come back here quickly. Don't get too far down a rabbit hole yet, because as I show you the rest of what I want to share with you, I'm going to give you a lot of context behind what you're looking at here and where else you can access it and just everything that's going on. So the next thing is the business feed. I'm going to skip that because, as you can see, I'm in a sample company, so there's nothing here. This will probably become more relevant when I get access to this in a company that's got actual data in it. These days, the only QBO company where that's true for me is my own firm. I sold my accounting practice. I no longer have clients. I do have one, but I haven't checked theirs to see if they've got it yet. Plus, I wouldn't want to put their stuff on display in a public video that goes out on YouTube and elsewhere. So we're skipping the business feed, and the next part is pretty self-explanatory. It's the create actions, right? These are obviously quick buttons where I can go if I need to create a certain type of transaction. However, and my first thought, and I almost skipped over this when I was initially looking at this because I thought show all is just going to give me the full list of transactions to create, but no. Tell him what he won, Bob. If I click show all, it actually takes me into a screen that lets me customize what I actually see here. Okay, and I already took the time to customize my favorites. Notice it says select up to 10. I'm going to advise you against using all 10 because, as you can see, with only 6, it just about fills up all the space I've got. And I've got my window size in a manner that's optimal for recording for a YouTube video, so it's a little smaller. A lot of you can spread out a little bit further, but what I'm getting at is if you fill up all 10 of these, it's after a while it starts defeating the purpose. The idea of something like this, of a favorites type menu, is to just have the few things that are most important to you, right? It's sort of like, I was telling somebody the other day, I had a friend who was showing me this book he was studying, and he had an entire page highlighted in yellow highlighter. And I'm like, you may as well have highlighted nothing, right? The same principle holds true here. If you fill it up with too much stuff, it defeats the purpose, you know, and it gets overwhelming by itself. Plus, the whole idea here is to give yourselves the things that are most important that you just want to make sure are right here at your fingertips when you need them. And if you scroll down, you'll see it's broken down into sections. I've got customers, vendors, team stuff, other stuff, and inventory stuff. So you can go through here and pick the things you like. And what I will tell you I did, very honestly, and you might want to follow a similar process, is I went through and filled up all 10 spots, then revisited it to see if I really had the top 10 things, and then I scaled it back to what ended up being 6. Right? And keep in mind, and one of the things I love about this, because this is the first example of several you're going to see here about how this is all very customizable. And the beauty of this is it can be customized differently for each client or customer that you have. This is very important to me because depending on the type of client or customer I'm working in, I'll have different priorities. If I have an e-commerce customer that I'm working in, then inventory and related stuff is going to become paramount. Whereas if it's a service-based business, obviously that's not going to be the case. So I really want my favorites and bookmarks and all the other things you're going to see me as I go through this and show you that you have access to and that you can customize. It's really important to me that you can do it differently for each different customer. Okay, so that's the create actions. Okay, spend a few minutes, pause the video right now if you need to, get into one of these and just play around and watch what you can do and look at what your choices are. Get familiar with it. Okay, next, another deep breath. Right, 4 count, 8 count. Right, in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8. I get excited and worked up, so I have to do that to slow myself down sometimes. So now we have business at a glance, and initially there's like every possible widget here that you can imagine using. And once again, you have options. I can hide all of it, right? This is like if I'm on an airplane or something and I want to make sure nobody can be looking over my shoulder, I can do that. That's cool. That was in the old version. But here, if I click this customize icon, this is where it starts to get interesting, right? So now I'm going to click add or remove widgets. And really, like in my case, for most of my own business for sure, and at this point, for any customers I was working on who weren't e-commerce, let's say, then my number one concern, especially when I'm looking at a dashboard, right? And let me stop for a minute and talk for just a second about what a dashboard should do, right? And the obvious comparison is to think about, what does your car's dashboard tell you? It tells you how fast you're going and how much gas is in the tank. Those are the two most important things. And then you get warning lights that come on when something needs your attention, right? This is a different kind of dashboard, but it should kind of follow the same philosophy, right? So I don't want all this stuff in here. I want the stuff that matters most to me indicated here. I can always go in and add things later, but for now, what I care about is cash and sales. Right? Those are my two things. So let's get rid of accounts payable. I don't even care about accounts receivable because by that time the sales already happened, and I'm going to assume we're going to collect everything and that it should be a rare event that we ever don't collect receivables. And I have reports to look at receivables if I need them. Okay? So bank accounts is my cash. Okay? I want cash flow. Definitely want to see that. Yeah, I might want to take a look at deposits. I'll leave expenses in because I want P&L kind of information. So I'm going to leave expenses and invoices. I don't care about mileage. I don't care about referrals. I do want the sales stuff. I don't care about unpaid sales tax returns, and I don't care about work requests. And let's click Save and see what that looks like. Okay, and then I'll click Save here. And so here's my bank accounts, right? And so this is handy. This is the first thing I want to see, assuming I've updated my bank feed so I know this is all up to date. Then this is useful, right? Now I've got my profit and loss, and then expenses. This is nice to see side by side, so I can kind of see if I'm, if I feel like a cash flow crunch, then I can look here and I can get quick insight, maybe into why that's happening, especially if I'm seeing that there's a lot more expenses compared to profits right now. Cash flow trend, this looks really slick. I actually can't wait to link up a real bank account so I can watch this thing come to life, but I love this. This is the kind of stuff, this is the warning light on my dashboard that lets me know when something needs my attention. I want to be able to see when there's a month that money out exceeds money in, or if there's a pattern where that is like a trend that I see emerging, where that starts to happen and keeps happening, right? Again, this is a warning light, okay? Over here, the invoices are very useful. I like the idea of this deposit tracker, especially where I'm using QuickBooks Payments, which I do on the rare event that I invoice somebody. Payments is gonna happen through QuickBooks Payments. So this I definitely can't wait to see come to life in my own books. And of course, this is sales being a sample file. There's no sales in the last 30 days to speak of. And then I look at this and I say, all right, here's a sales and get paid funnel, right? And looking at this, I'm like, maybe I don't really need this. So let's go back up here, right? Add or remove. Let's get rid of that. And let's even get rid of that, right? I like everything I had right up to that point, right? And again, the idea is to be minimal about this. So initially you get splashed with this dashboard and it's overwhelming because they're just kind of showing you everything that's possible. So your job is to get in here and chisel it down to just the things that matter most. One of the reasons a lot of us are stressed out in our businesses as accounting practices and bookkeeping practices is we're unclear on what matters most, and that refers to managing the tasks and projects that we have to take care of, and even when it comes down to something like this, is really having clarity about what matters most. And maybe the process of going through what I've just done and deciding what matters most is going to help you get clarity on what does really matter the most to me. And of course, some of my constituents, my friends who are in my Talk Nerdy to Me community, and especially those who are in my Notion-based programs, have already told me they're going through this with a notepad open in Notion and taking notes about what they're learning, what they're experiencing, and how they want to set this up. Because what I showed them all when I shared the unboxing video that I did was how customizable this all is. And in many ways, it reminds me of what I designed in Notion in terms of the operating system that I've built in Notion that is comprised of a network of templates, and it's designed to put everything you need right at your fingertips while having it tucked away neatly so that it's not overwhelming, so it doesn't get in the way, so when I need to work on something, I can get focused. So if you haven't yet, open up a QuickBooks company file where you've got access to this new layout and go play with the stuff I've just shown you before we move on to part 2. So pause me, go play, and then come back and resume me, and we'll dive in next into the sidebar, which is what part 2 is all about. Part 2, we're going to break down this whole entire sidebar, what's here, and how to customize just about everything that is here. Okay, now, this whole time so far, I've just been in this dashboard, right? I haven't gone anywhere else outside of this screen. And what you're going to notice in a second is as soon as I click into this My Menu area, an icon is going to appear right up at the top here that lets me expand and collapse an extra sidebar that's going to pop out. Okay, and that's going to be your first example of how this new layout gives you the access to things right at your fingertips, but keeps them neatly tucked away so that I can focus on what's going on here as I get in here and I need to, right? That's the job, that's the design. So I click on My Menu. Before I click, actually, I hover, and this pops out. And I can obviously access these sections from here and then move my mouse and it disappears. Now, mind you, as far as these kinds of pop-out sidebars go, I've used very similar things in Notion and lots of other applications, and they're often very frustrating to deal with because they kind of like they'll go away when you don't mean for them to, or they pop out when you don't mean for them to. This one, the responsiveness is like, it's spot on. It's like they finally nailed it. Somebody finally nailed how to get this right so that it doesn't do that, right? So the next thing is I can click on it. And when I click on it, it docks it open. And now this little guy appears, and I can hide it, okay? And now, spoiler alert, something I'm going to share with you in part 3 that I saw a lot of people asking about before I got to look at this myself was, they took away the accountant tools. And if you had spent 5 minutes doing what I've done here, you would have found that the accounting tools are very much alive and well. They're just in a new place, integrated into the rest of the menu navigation, which I think makes a lot of sense. Instead of having all these sort of disparate different menu areas and different places to go for different things. And it's like, I don't even know what the logic was other than I had to, in the beginning, always remember that, oh, accountant tools were up here, right? Why? Like, all navigation should be in one place, like this sidebar here. Okay, now yours is not going to show tools on the top. It's going to show it on the bottom. I'll show you in a minute how that gets customized, right? But also note that I can collapse each of these sections so I can focus, right? And again, I love that. And we're going to look at bookmarks, and we're going to look at how to customize each of these sections by clicking this. So now, recognize this symbol, very similar to the one we saw here on the dashboard. Anytime you see this symbol, that means there's settings to get into and customize. It's customization. The first thing we can customize is the sections. So this is how I moved my tools, which is what used to be accountant tools, up to the top. Initially they were down here, but these were those block icons. I like to call them cheese graters. Right, so you can click the cheese grater and drag them to reorder them based on what's most important to you. So if you love the accountant's tools, right, which I do, I especially love reclassify transactions, then you'll want to maybe move this up to the top so it's the first thing that shows up when you go into My Menu. But wait, there's more. Now we can go into bookmarks. Okay, these are the same bookmarks that you're going to find over here when we get to that part. This is just where we can go to actually customize them. And I've taken the time to check off the things that I like. Notice reclassify transactions is here. Let's get rid of that, okay? And I just want to confirm when I get rid of that, I don't believe the choice will be found here. And that's something I want to show you coming up, actually, right? So there's no more reclassified transactions here, which is to say that not everything that you can and might want to bookmark will necessarily appear here, but any screen you can access in QBO, I'll show you in a few minutes how you can bookmark that screen. Okay, so let's say these are the things I want most, and you know, another thing that I'll spoil now that comes up in part 3 is, you know, some people had said to me, well, I've got these workflows based on the old layout, now I've got to rework all my workflows, and my answer to that is great. This is a perfect opportunity to improve, and especially as hopefully by now you're starting to see how much better this is, I think, because I have so much control over the things that are most important to me. I don't have to use any other apps to deal with bookmarks and other things, right? It's all built in beautifully right here, right where I want it. And so workflow-wise, I don't know about you, but the first thing I want to do just about any time I go into a customer's file is update the bank feeds. So that's why this is first. Recurring transactions is another thing I like to do a lot of, because even though most clients file on a cash basis, I like to run books on an accrual basis because that's proper matching, so I can really see how a business performed in a given period. And a lot of the way that I accomplish that is through recurring transactions, so I can normalize things showing up in the right month regardless of when they were actually paid, right? And on down the line. So these are the things that are important to me, okay? You should go through this list and decide what's most important to you, okay? As you can see, there are a lot of choices. And again, warning, reminder, don't overwhelm yourself by including too many things. After a certain point, you're going to hit like a critical mass of volume of stuff in here where it's going to defeat the purpose of having bookmarks, because there's going to be too much stuff in there and you're going to actually make it difficult for yourself to find what you need. So be very selective about this stuff. Okay, next let's go to create. Okay, and then I want to go back here for a second since I clicked away to make sure I didn't have to like save it first, right? These are things you should get in the habit of, learning about, learn the behavior of these dialogues. So no, I can click into create and focus on this for a minute. And create is those like create type transactions, right? But this is not tied to that view that we already customized on the dashboard. This is a different create menu that you can access through my menu. So this can be different. Maybe what you put on the dashboard are the highest level things that you need to do most frequently. Maybe here it's more sort of drilled down in terms of what you choose to give yourself access to here. And then tools is again that same accountant tools menu. And now you can choose which of these things you have access to. So if you don't care about all this stuff, just uncheck the stuff you don't need or care about. Now I'm going to hit save to make sure that my updates are saved. Okay. Again, you can collapse these so you can focus on the one particular area that you want to get into. And if I want to go to reclassify transactions, great. Then I can click this so I can focus, right? That's exactly what I mean about tucking things away. Because once I'm here, I don't want anything encroaching on the side of my screen. I want to be able to focus on doing my search to find the account that has the transactions that I want to reclassify, and then using my filters to chisel it down to just the things I want to reclassify. And then I want to find the transactions and reclassify them, right? So this is why I love this. I think it is actually so well done, because it gives me the ability to control what I have access to quickly and easily, and it also gives me the control of being able to tuck it away, get it out of the way once I've gotten to where I need to go so I can focus. Okay, so that's my menu. That's the first part. A lot of the rest of this is going to go a lot faster, so just bear with me. But again, this is a good time to pause me if you haven't and kind of catch up or go play around with your My Menu, do some customizations. And by the way, as you do these things, I would love for you to click over into my community where you can comment on this post, because I'm dying to hear your feedback, and I'm going to invite you to do more things with me sort of on an interactive basis around this video and this article that I've written, because I really want to hear more and more feedback from you so I can help you think through and troubleshoot how to update these kind of workflows that we're talking about that a lot of you have told me you've lost because of the new interface. And so my goal here is to help you build newer, better workflows, right? All right, so that's my menu, okay? And now as long as I don't click back onto the dashboard, this little pop-out is going to remain there, right? So if I go to create, first, again, always hover your mouse over before you click on something. Most of you should recognize this unless you're new to QuickBooks altogether, right? This is the same create menu that we've always had, but again, it's grouped and tucked away neatly with all the other stuff that's now just collapsed in this simple navigation, right? So I love this. If I click on it, it goes away. Okay, so that's another thing I'm going to encourage you to do as you go through each of these things on the sidebar. I'm going to show you. My menu has a hover menu, but you can click on it and it will add it if it wasn't already there like this. Okay, the create menu is just a pop-out, so I can quickly get in here and say, well, I need to receive payment on an invoice. Boom, I'm there, right? Notice now the whole screen is focused, so I can just book this transaction and there's no distractions. And once I'm done, I close this and I'm right back where I was. Okay. So the create menu is just a pop-out menu. If you click on it to kind of make it stay, it doesn't work that way with this, right? So if I expand this here, again, just clicking it is going to make it go away actually after it's appeared, which is kind of slick by itself, by the way. A lot of times these hover menus don't go away until you move your mouse away. So if I, for some reason, want to make it go away, I can actually just click there without having to move my mouse. Just when you understand that, it makes it easier to work with, okay? Next, we have bookmarks. These are the same exact bookmarks that we would have configured here, right, under my menu, right? So I have tools, and let's collapse this for a second, right? So when it's just popped out, you can't collapse these sections. When it's here, I can collapse, for example, tools to see my bookmarks. And I just want to make the point and stress that the bookmarks here that I can customize and decide what I'm including, exactly the same bookmarks that I will see here, okay? And if I want to edit them from here, I can actually click the pencil icon, and now I'm in essentially just that one bookmarks part of the same dialog where I can go through here and decide what all else I want to bookmark. But notice also here, I have a search. So if I know that I'm looking for something in particular, right, reclassify, let's see if that shows up. And it does not, right? So, but the point is, if you know what you're looking for, you can use the search to try and find it. But like I said, there's going to be another way I'm going to show you where you can add any page you'd want to your bookmarks, okay? So, of course, if you've found anything that you wanted and checked it off, then click Save. I'll click Cancel, okay? So that's bookmarks. And then over here is where it says Bookmark Current Page. So remember, when I said that I wanted to bookmark reclassify transactions, and I removed it so that I could show you this process, right? So I go to first I navigate to the reclassified transactions page, which is part of the tools, which I can access here. So maybe I don't need to bookmark it again. This is purely just experiential, as in this is what I want to have as my experience based on if I know that in my brain I'm going to think to go to bookmarks when I want to get to reclassify transactions, then you add it. Right? If I feel like I'm just going to be able to form the habit very quickly of using this my menu to get there, then that's all I need. So in other words, there's not a right or wrong answer. There's not this makes sense and this doesn't make sense. It's purely your experience based on how your brain works. In fact, the way that I learn how to set these things up often is when I go to look for something, where did I go look for it? And maybe didn't find it, right? What that tells me is that's where my brain told me to go find it. Which means, in this case, if I find that I went to bookmarks to go to find reclassified transactions and I didn't find it there, well, I should put it there because that's where my brain, for whatever reason, told me to go look for it. And that's all the reason I need. So as long as I'm here on reclassified transactions, I'll go to bookmarks and it says bookmark current page. It pulls in the name. I'll say save. Of course, I could have named it something else. But now I want to add it because what I want to do is I want to bring that up to the top. Right? I still want bank transactions first because that's, like I said, the first thing I want to do every day. And then I'll do reclassify, right? And so on. And obviously, I could wake up next Monday and decide, you know what, I hate this order of things, and I'll just reorder it. Like, I think sometimes there's a tendency to think when we do these things like, this is the way it has to be forever. And it's like, no, the whole beauty of this is I can wake up every day and change it if that's what sort of suits me, right? That's the beauty of this, is there's all the flexibility I ever need. And once again, I'll remind you and stress that this is for this one particular client, which happens to be my Bulletproof AP sample company, right? So these settings are going to be set differently from one client to the next based on what's important to you, what matters most to you for that particular client, okay? Now we go to the dashboard, and that's where we started. And notice when I click there, that little icon goes away, okay? The feed is once again going to take us to that business feed, which I can't really show you much of because I'm in a sample file, so there's nothing here, right? But I encourage you to explore it in, let's say, one of your clients, companies who has this, and then let me know if you find anything useful about this, okay? And notice even here, the icon to pop out that sidebar menu doesn't reappear yet. Now let's look at reports. I hover, I haven't clicked, and this little pop-out menu shows if I click it, it takes me into what is another screen that should be very familiar to all of you unless you just started using QuickBooks, because this is the same kind of report layout that you've had for quite some time. Again, it's just tucked away over here. And with this hover menu, notice it's indicating custom reports is bookmarked, because that was a bookmark that I had created. And so that little bookmark icon lets me know I can bookmark any of these right from here. So again, this is an area you're very familiar with already. It's just, I think, a much faster, easier way to get there. And like I've said, we're putting all these things in one place. All the navigation, there's one place to go for any of the navigation that I would need to access. Notice also when I clicked in here, I got this back. So I could pop this out, okay? But notice also, it's a different menu, right? This is a reports related menu where I've got, again, the same kinds of things that pop out here and here. And so this is going to be a little easier to work with because it's sort of static. You just saw as I go down here and I get to here, if I'm not careful and I go too far down, it goes away. So this is an example of like where they did really well with this. And this one, it's, you know, like you have to kind of try. Maybe it's just because the dialogue is smaller, but I find that kind of thing happens a lot and I find it annoying. So no problem. If I don't like the hover behavior, all I have to do is click on here and then expand it. And here I am. I've got quick access to everything I need. And assuming standard reports is where I want to be, then I just close this once again so I can focus. So it's like you have these drawers that you open up to access the things that are in the drawers and then you close it. Okay, almost done. Now, my apps. Remember, I told you when we looked at the dashboard that these are the things that we're calling apps. These are the very same things you'll recognize that were spread out across the top of the dashboard. This is how you access them when you're in any other place in the system, right? So otherwise, I would have to go out to the dashboard to maybe click over here to get to projects, right? And that would be annoying, right? So instead, I have access to all of this stuff from anywhere I am in the system by hovering here to my apps, and this is much easier to navigate if you ask me than doing that sideways scroll. And incidentally, if you don't have a mouse with a sideways scroll wheel, get one, but even with that, it doesn't work there on the dashboard. I tried it several times. I tried clicking in the area first to make sure it recognized that I was there. Tried everything and it doesn't work. Maybe that's something they'll fix. That's feedback, and they now have a new feedback link that you can use to give feedback if you're inclined, which is probably the best way to, instead of complaining on social media, you're a lot more effective if you just give the feedback, because if you and 50 other people are giving the same feedback, you know, they'll prioritize that kind of stuff. So that's what my apps is all about. And then you have this section here called pinned. And so if I click more, or hover over more rather, these are the 3 apps that are pinned right now. If I go here to customize, I can customize that. So here you have up to 3 apps that you can pin so that they'll show up under pinned. Now it's collapsed on my screen because, as I mentioned earlier, I have my window a little bit smaller than you're probably normally working with for video optimization purposes. But either way, you can click customize, and notice it won't let me select anymore because I would have to unselect something to select something else. So let's say I wanted to, you know, use lending. And again, this is another example of where it's really going to be useful to be able to customize it differently, customer by customer, because I may be looking at a customer where lending is a priority. So I can do that and just move this up here so everything's all together. And so now I have that pinned. And that may be a temporary pin where I just go here while I'm working on trying to line up financing. And, you know, then once I'm done, if I got the line of credit for them, then I can come back here and say, all right, I don't need this anymore. Let's get something else going up here, whatever, and then save. So that's what pin is all about. And that's what customize is all about, right? And that's basically the whole sidebar, right? It's not actually that much when you slow down and just kind of break it down piece by piece and section by section. One thing you can't customize is the order that things appear here. It would be cool if you could. That's what I thought this was going to do originally, until I understood that it was just customizing these apps based on what you have pinned. All good though. You know, it's not like there's so much stuff here that, you know, I need to be able to change the order. It's easy enough to me to get in here and figure out, you know, what I need. So again, if you haven't yet, pause me, practice what I've shown you here, go through the sidebar, go through each of these menus. play with how to customize this. And just the more you practice with something like this, the more you'll get used to it. And again, if you go into this with the right mindset, instead of complaining about it, but kind of thinking, okay, what's possible? What can I do with this? I can guarantee you'll start coming up with ideas and ways that I think you're going to eventually come back to me and say, you know what, Seth, you were right. I've actually got better workflows now once I took the time to understand the new interface and all the things that I could do with it. I went into this expecting I was going to hate it because that's all I heard from people. And now that I've been in it and I've learned to do things with an open mind, regardless of, what I've been hearing, I came in here expecting to hate it and actually fell in love with it for the reasons I've mentioned. And again, to summarize and recap, the main reasons are it gives me access to everything I need right at my fingertips while keeping things neatly tucked away so that while I'm working on a specific area, I can get and stay focused. And to me, that's the name of the game. If you want to be productive, I need to be focused. I need to be able to get into flow, which means I need to not have all kinds of things distracting me. And I believe this accomplishes that. And so finally, when you're ready, you can continue on to part 3, which, as I said, is called Where's My Shit? Okay, so where is your shit? Let's start with the most obvious. And if you've watched this all at once, then it's probably still fresh. Where the accountant's tools are. That's the first thing I've seen every time I've seen this new interface brought up within a Facebook group or in my own circle community, wherever. It seems like it's always the first question is, they took away accountant's tools. And the answer is they did not take away the accountant's tools. You'll find them here in my menu. If you haven't customized this yet, then yours will be at the bottom instead of the top. And if you want to move it to the top like I've done, all you have to do is customize it as I've shown. And then, I dragged it back down. In your case, you'll find it here originally. You drag it back up. And don't forget to scroll down if you need to here and click Save. Okay? And so that's where the accountant's tools are. They did not take it away. They've just logically integrated that whole section. Instead of being its own separate thing at the top here, which I always thought was kind of weird, it's all down in here now. Okay? And somebody brought up, I guess they used to have like journal entries and stuff here, but you don't need that. You can, first of all, I can do journal entries from here in the Create menu. And if I really need to, I can bookmark journal entries over here. Right, so lots of alternatives. If you got used to going to accountant's tools to get there, the truth is that was a lot more clicks and sort of you had to go almost out of the immediate QuickBooks area to get into that special area just to get back into this to book journal entries, right? So for many reasons I can list, I think this is so much better. Okay, the next thing that's come up a lot actually has, well, let's put it this way. My solution to the next thing that came up a lot has nothing to do with QuickBooks Online, except that evidently a lot of you have gotten used to having a link you can click on within QBO to open up a second window in QBO. All right, so two things. You never needed that, and the reality is if you use the browser version of it, it was actually easier, right? And we're going to talk about what you're seeing on my left here, because most of you have your tabs across the top. I have what's called vertical tabs. I'm going to go through that next and explain why this is so much better. But for now, pretend this is your tab up at the top, and you just right-click and go Duplicate Tab, right? And by the way, pro tip, whenever I go into a QBO company, before I do anything, I'm usually going to duplicate the tab several times so that as I dig in using one tab, I can, without losing my place, go into any other area that I need to. Right? It's just like I've made it habit now. Like as sure as I go into a QuickBooks company, I'll duplicate the tab 2 or 3 times. A good example is I'll go into like reports. Let's say I'm finished with bank feeds and everything else. So I'll open up one tab with the reports. The second tab is going to be I'll open up the reports and specifically I'll run the balance sheet. And then the third tab, I'm going to go into reports and run the P&L. Right? And then I'll duplicate this tab because I've used up all my available tabs. So right-click duplicate was always a much easier way to duplicate tabs. One interesting bit of feedback somebody in my Talk Nerdy to Me community gave on this was she said some IT person had told her not to do that because it'll overwrite your data. I've never heard something so ridiculous. It's not going to overwrite anything. Now, if you're in a tab or in the middle of entering a transaction and you open up that and you duplicate that tab, then the rule there is in the new tab, get out of that transaction, because if that's one way you could lose data. If you go back to the first tab and do some stuff and save it, and then you go into the other tab still having the transaction open but in the state it was in when you originally duplicated it, and you save that, I could see that potentially maybe overwriting you. But simple logic should dictate that if I duplicate first of all, avoid duplicating a tab when you're in the middle of a transaction editing. Second sort of line of defense is if you happen to do that, then in the new tab, close out of the transaction. I've done that many times for many years, okay? So duplicating your tab is the easiest thing you can do. You did not need a link. If anything, having to navigate to a link to do that is probably harder and clunkier, and you're effectively going out of your way. So don't do that. You never should have needed that, okay? My opinion, I'm not trying to shame anyone. Okay, now let's talk about vertical tabs. Now, I am not a fan of Microsoft products, but Microsoft Edge is the one Microsoft product I will swear by. It's better than Chrome, and one of the reasons I originally went to try it was because I was reading article after article about how it was superior to Chrome, Safari, and all the other browsers out there, mostly because it was designed so many years later than all the other ones were, and so they had an opportunity to really look at where all the other browsers were deficient, and they've improved on that. And so, and especially on security and a number of other things, I read more than one article. You know, I read one article, I'm like, all right, maybe that's somebody's agenda, opinion, whatever. But when I consistently read tons of articles, of course, from sources I trust, and they all say the same thing, I start to believe it. So, the thing that got me hooked on Edge, though, was what you're seeing here on my left, which is called vertical tabs. Now, I've seen you. I've logged in with a ton of you. For many years, I've logged in with accountants and bookkeepers and business owners alike, and I can't remember the last time I didn't see somebody's browser open with like 100 tabs going across the top. And you can't even see what's in there. And I'd be willing to bet that in almost every one of your cases that you probably have more than one instance where you have the same thing open in 2 or more tabs because you went to look for it, and with all those tabs open, as small as they get, you have no way of knowing what's where, and so you just open up another tab and go to the same thing, little realizing you have it open in 2 other places, right? Which is, it defeats the purpose. It begs the question, why are you keeping all these tabs open? Then there's the security issue around having all these tabs open, because every time you open a browser tab, you're opening another port between your computer and the internet, which is another opportunity for somebody to get in. So from a security standpoint, it's a bad idea. Not to mention, you should be shutting your browser down at night and probably shutting down your computer at night, also for security reasons and a number of other reasons. So for lots of reasons, you're going to love vertical tabs. All right, and so what vertical tabs do is, as you can see, I can see very clearly all these tabs that are open, and I have these all in a tab group called QBO, right? So as I'm sitting here duplicating these tabs, it's very clear what's where. I'll click here on dashboard, right? And when I'm at the dashboard, notice the metadata for the dashboard is where it just says QuickBooks, right? But in the profit and loss, it says profit and loss, and stop it. All right, balance sheet, stop it. I hate when they do this. It's like the ultimate productivity killer. I understand they kind of need to do it, but I hate it. I wish there was a way to, like, tell it when you wanted that kind of thing to happen. Anyway, I digress. So here is your tab group. And by the way, little cool pro tip, Edge memorizes the browsers that are, or the browser tabs that are open in tab groups. So I can shut this browser down, I can shut this computer down, and when I turn my computer back on and open up Microsoft Edge, all these same tab groups will come back with all the tabs opening up to the same exact locations. So that's pretty cool. In fact, it perfectly accomplishes what you're trying to do with all those tabs across the top, except in this case, I can actually see what's going on. So there's that. Okay, so that's your vertical tabs. I can't stress enough, I can't recommend highly enough that you try Edge. It works just as well as Chrome. It works beautifully with QuickBooks Online. I've not run into any issues. And even with extensions, if they don't have an extension specifically for Edge, all the extensions for Chrome pretty much work in Edge. I've yet to run into one that doesn't. In fact, when I go to that particular extensions page, it will kind of let me know, hey, this can be installed in Edge too, click here, right? So don't worry about extensions. I guarantee you will not experience any kind of loss of utility in terms of the extensions you like to use when you're using the Edge browser. Okay, so that's your vertical tabs, and again, it makes it so easy to do this, and I can just click this plus sign now to open up a new tab in the group, and I have QuickBooks Online bookmarked right at the top, right? So there's lots of ways I can easily and quickly just get into multiple areas within a QuickBooks company file. All right, finally on this, let's talk about control click. Now this doesn't work everywhere, but it works a lot of the places. So for example, let me just close up some of these. And let's say I'm done looking at my balance sheet here, and so now I want to go into apps, and I'm going to go to accounting here, right? And within accounting, I've got some different things. So let's say I want to go into bank transactions. Hold down the control key and click on it. When I hold down control and click, notice what it did. It opened that up in a new tab. That works almost anywhere on the internet, by the way. Pretty much every page ever on the internet. Any link that you would click on, if you hold down control when you click on it, it will open that link up in a new tab. There are exceptions. If you do it from here, if you hover your mouse over your bookmarks and try to open up reclassify, control click does not work. It just opens it in the same tab. That's the only place so far I think that I've found where it doesn't really work. If I go to my menu and I control click, that does work. Okay, so this is a matter of just getting used to playing around and getting used to it, and over time you'll just learn. You'll start to remember where that works and where it doesn't. But generally speaking, if you're on one page and there's something you want to click into, but you want it open in a new tab, control click is your best friend. Let's try it from here. Let's go to expenses and pay bills, control click, boom, new tab. So control click, especially if what you're trying to get to when you open up the new tab is based on something that's on the screen in the tab that you're in, it is probably without a doubt the best way to get that thing open in a new tab. It's the least movement away from where you are, and it's the fewest clicks. So 3 different ways essentially here: duplicating the tab, using vertical tabs like I've got, and control click. 3 different ways to replace what your workflow used to be to open up a new tab when you're working in QuickBooks Online. Okay, last but not least, let's talk workflows, okay? Because like I said, a bunch of you mentioned to me that it's killing your workflows because you had figured out all these workflows for years based on the old layout, and now with this new layout, it's not going to work. So here's the thing. Again, I want you to try and consider looking at this instead of as a disruption, as an opportunity. And I know it can be annoying because you've got work to do and you just want to get in and do your work, and you've got your systems, right? And here's the thing. In some ways, this is another reason why I like the fact that this gets forced on us from time to time. I'll speak for myself when I say that as annoying as it can be, because it's disruptive, because now I have to stop what I'm doing and it's going to take me longer while I figure things out. The truth is, I've learned to start looking at these things as an opportunity, because as I learn this new layout and how to navigate everything, and as I start to understand how things are beautifully and neatly tucked away while giving me quick access to the things I need as soon as I need them, then I can realize that it's a perfect opportunity to build new workflows. And I mentioned earlier that some of my constituents in Talk Nerdy to Me, and specifically people in my Holistic Accountant program, because we're such heavy Notion users, have told me, I didn't even have to suggest it, they probably knew I would, that they're getting into Notion and just making notes as they go through and learning. As they're going through and learning this, they're making notes about how they will do things differently going forward. So here's an example of how I'd make a start at rewriting my SOP for how I'm working in QuickBooks Online with the new layout. Now, if you're not a Notion user, you can use any document type. You can do it in Google Docs for all I care. I just love Notion, and so this is where I would do it. And I figure I might as well take the opportunity to show you how nice this will look potentially in Notion. So the people who know me know that I love working with what these are called, which are toggles. Okay, and I'm very granular when I write an SOP. So the first thing, and remember, the idea is to keep things neatly tucked away, but give me access to the things I need quickly. So in 30 seconds, I can get signed into QBO. Now, based on some recent examples of people who I know whose QBO accounts got hijacked, I've started using a passkey, which means when it comes to signing in, I want a quick and slick process to get signed in quickly. The passkey kind of creates a bit of friction unto itself, because every time I go into QBO, I need to enter my master password, and that's because I'm using Dashlane, and that's how Dashlane works. And there are other password tools that don't require it every time. I actually like that it requires it because I like the security of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Enter. That reveals this. Pretend this was my actual passkey. I come in here, Control C, down to this one. There's my login link. This one is actually linked straight to banking because that's often the first thing I want to do. But when I click here, if I wasn't already logged in, it would take me to the login screen. Dashlane will come in and prompt me for my passkey, which I would paste in now because I've already copied it to the clipboard. And boom, now I'm off and running. Okay. And next, the first thing I want to do every time I go into QBO is update bank feeds. So here's where I've got a screenshot to kind of give an example of when I write an SOP in Notion. I'll have the screenshot because if I'm giving this to one of my staff to work on, I want them to be able to see, especially at a time like this when everything's just completely changed over. So I give them the screenshot in our SOP and say, here's where you go, so you can get right into the bank transactions area. And or I could also have put the link directly into bank feeds here, because once you're logged in, just click on that, it will take you in. You'll be in a new tab. That's another way. That's a fourth way to get into a new tab, is if you're working in other software like Notion to manage things, then you can actually give yourselves the link to, you know, especially to those kind of areas where there's a specific URL that no matter whose company you're in, it will take you to, for example, your bank feeds. Okay, so that is my 2 cents or 10 cents worth on how you might approach rewriting your processes for how you work in QBO based on the new layout. And I really, like I said, want to encourage you to consider that this is potentially an opportunity more than a disruption. And finally, I'm going to invite you to do something here. All right, this is the part of the video that's my call to action, except I'm not asking you to buy anything from me. I'm actually asking you to take advantage of me for free. I want you to challenge me. I want you to comment below. In YouTube is fine, but it's better in Circle. I'll be more attentive in Circle, I can promise you, because I kind of live in there all day long. YouTube, it might be a day or so before I see the notification and get back to you. So links in the description, click over, join the community. It's free. You can access this, you can comment on it. And I want you to challenge me. I want you to comment with any workflows that you've lost and want to rebuild. And obviously, assuming you don't already see a clear way for how to do that. All right, so let's see. I'll work with you and let's see if we can't rebuild your workflows better, stronger, faster than they were before. The bionic workflows. Okay, and so again, let's look for the opportunities instead of the problems. I promise you, you'll be happier for it. As always, I hope you learned something here, had some fun along the way. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you in my Talk Nerdy to Me community.